can see, we have a brief introduction by myself. My name is Tim van der Staaij, and on behalf of the city of Rotterdam, I'd like to welcome you to this session. Thereafter, we have 3 experts from across Europe. The first one is Enrico, based in the Netherlands, Lykke, she is in Copenhagen, and Piero is in Milan. And then at the end, we will do the Q&A. But why do we have these weather-wise sessions? This is all part of the Road to CAS, and CAS is the Climate Adaptation Summit 2021. It is hosted by the Dutch Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management, and also the Global Center on Adaptation. At the 25th of January in 2021, this online conference will take place during the whole day. In a 24-hour TV show, we will broadcast all the latest and the newest adaptation actions, and we will share with you all these lessons. Most important is the inclusiveness of the summit, whereas everybody can take part. As Rotterdam, we are proud to be hosting the CAS, and furthermore, we are also actively involved in accelerating climate adaptation. This is something that we do together with all the people in the city as well, the stakeholders, companies, knowledge institutions, and we are happy to have you here as well. So please do participate, and we will try to accelerate climate adaptation as fast as possible. This first session is about extreme heat. As you all noticed, temperatures are rising. Especially in Europe, we see an increase in temperature each year. And first of all, in Copenhagen, sometimes I heard it's not very hot, but the temperatures are still rising, and Lykke Leonardsen will give us the latest intel about the changing weather patterns. Lykke is involved in climate adaptation for over 25 years, and hopefully Lykke can introduce a little bit about herself and all the work that she has been doing. Lykke, could you please tell us a little bit more how Copenhagen is dealing with extreme heat?
Well, we are not dealing a lot with extreme heat. That's also what I'll be focusing on in my presentation. But we do have some issues with heat. We've had some hot summers, and it's sort of I think there's a growing attention in Copenhagen that we need also to look at the effects of heat in the city in the long run, especially sort of the links between or the shifts between very wet and very dry and hot. I mean, that also will be a challenge for the city in the future, that we will have a much more varied climate where we sort of at least in the summer, where we can actually change between very hot and very dry to very wet and so on. So it's something that will challenge us also in the future.
All right, that's good to hear. So the fluctuation between the extremes will be something to take into account. I'm very curious about your presentation later on after the first speaker.
Let me please correct you. I haven't been working with climate change adaptation for 25 years. I've been working for the city of Copenhagen for almost 25 years. I've been working with climate change adaptation since 2008. Actually, one of the cities that kicked us off in the process was Rotterdam. So we actually were inspired by other cities to say, this is also something that we need to look at in Copenhagen.
Thank you for the explanation. And next in line is Piero. And always when I go to Italy, it's always hot. It's always full of vibrations and good emotions. Maybe Piero, you can tell us a little bit more about if it's truly that hot and the temperature is rising, or is it just my perception?
Well, today no. Today we make it raining to cool down the city. And it's cold. And I know that in Rotterdam, the Netherlands, the weather is better than Milan nowadays. But yes, absolutely yes. The answer is correct. I'm 38, and in Italy, since when I was born in 1982, we always have seen the temperature rise, the average temperature. So I never lived a colder years compared to the previous one. If you look at Milan specifically, since 1951 until now, we've seen 3+ degrees up there to rise the temperature, and we almost sleep with 41 tropical nights over a years. So just a number, I think it's a good figure to say that yes, the temperature is rising. We're supposed to enjoy it because there is, that we don't have any more fog and there is less gray than it was 30 years ago. But then the heat island effect is impacting on society. So absolutely correct. We become hot and hot, and hopefully we're capable, and we show you how later on we are dealing with an increased temperature in Milan.
Okay, thank you. So I think that these are two quite interesting cities that kind of differ from each other related to the temperatures, but both cities do experience an increase in temperature. And maybe it's nice then to go a little bit to the middle of Europe and start to introduce Enrico Moens. And Enrico Moens is actually one of the pioneers of the research about urban insight and the extreme heat. And Enrico, I hope that you can also share some of your experience already related to urban heat.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Yeah, I will show some little experience also, of course, in my presentation. But as Lykke and Piero already introduced, the weather is changing, and in the Holland, well, it's nice that it gets a little bit hotter, so the summers will be nice. We can go to the beach, but also the effect of urban heat is, I believe, underestimated in the Netherlands and in Europe, because we see of the heat waves are getting intenser, and also the urban heat island shows that temperatures will be much higher in the future. If you look at the scenarios for the future, the temperature can be 4 or 5 degrees higher on average. That might be nice, because we love the sun in the Netherlands. Nowadays, we have to be also in the Netherlands because of the COVID situation. We cannot go abroad too much, but also the negative aspects of the heat we have to take into account. And as you know, in the Netherlands, well, we pay a lot of attention to, you could say, the water management, because we are below the sea level. And I believe that the effects of heat on people are underestimated. And I think we should strive to try to get more blue-green networks, blue-green solutions in the cities, that people can move through the city, that also the older people can go out, and that there is some green space near to their housing so that they go outside and not stay inside their houses. Well, I'm working for about more than 25 years on climate adaptation, and it's nice to see also Piero and Lykke again. So I hope we will have some good discussions and see also the differences between the cities, because I think and I believe that cities can learn from each other. And I think that's the nice challenge of having all those networks, learn from each other, try to improve, and I think we have to take more action and to adapt to the climate change.
All right, thank you. And if I understand correct, you said the temperatures are rising, and you actually like the fact that it's getting hotter in the Netherlands. For me personal, in the Netherlands, we had quite a hot summer, actually the hottest summer ever. How did you get through that summer? Did you bought an air conditioning, or did you went outside?
Well, good question, Tim. Well, of course, it was a very strange summer, because there was a kind of a semi-lockdown, you could say, in the Netherlands, but also to other countries. So we had to work at home, we had to stay at home, and well, also I have some 3 daughters, and they're all studying, but they had to go outside abroad for their studies, but it was not allowed, and they already well hired their rooms to other students, so they came back home. So it was nice but hectic at home. And it was hot because we had a very hot summer, more than 10 days, then over 35 degrees. So it was well difficult to deal with. I did not buy some equipment for that because I think we have to deal it in a natural way. So living a little bit in the shade, going outside to the parks, going out for biking. I like biking in the Netherlands, but I also changed my, I think, daily rhythm. I start early in the morning for working. When it's too hot in the afternoon, relax a little and then go more working a little bit in the evening. So maybe Piero a little bit more too, like people doing in Milan and or in Italy and Spain. So it was a kind of a strange summer. I also had to take care of my mum. She's in the 80s, and especially during the heat wave, well, taking care that she would drink enough, she would go outside, sitting in the shade, and not stay only inside the house. So it was a little bit a strange experience, but I think we have to deal with this also more in the future. So I hope we learn also from the situations and that we can adapt in the future.
Yeah, so it looks like you're already adapting, so that's good to hear. And actually, my question is now, will we see this more often in the future? So please do take us into your research and please present all these interesting facts that you have come up with. So the floor is yours, and you can share your presentation and start this discussion.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Can you see the presentation? It's working?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I will go into the presentation and tell more about, well, we call it building resilience, being young and getting old in a hotter Europe. I did some research with the University of Utrecht the last half year, interviewing also different cities about how they deal with heat. And I would like to give you some a little bit more insights in the predictions of the future, what kind of temperatures cities will deal with and what kind of solutions would be possible. So I hope to give you a short introduction on this and that we can later on see, for instance, how the city of Copenhagen and the city of Milan will deal also with the heat stress. So I would like to make first a statement. I think we have to redesign our cities more, and with those most vulnerable at the top of our minds, to take into account especially the older people and also the younger people, because they are the most affected, we believe, from the heat stress. And as already told, the hot summers across Europe, they are increasing in the recent years. We have seen it last summer very clearly. And especially the last 3-4 years, we had a lot of records were broken by the situation. And also the cities are urbanizing, the populations are increasing, and also the fact that people, well, getting older, so we have to take care more also of the older people. So we believe a new design principles are required to deal with the heat stress. And as one of the interviewers, for instance, said, you can see it on the screen, climate risks such as flooding, they are very visual, whereas the heat is invisible. Because people can't see it, they don't necessarily perceive it as a risk. And that's, well, the basis, you could say, for my presentation. Well, in this figure, what you can see now, I have tried to give an overview of the danger of heat now and into the future. If you look at this figure, you can see that the casualties, the fatalities from natural hazards for earthquakes, floods, storms, and even other well, situations is much less than the effect from the heat waves. You can see that a lot of people suffer from heat waves. About 80,000 people well, died from heat stress in Europe in recent years. And that was a little bit shocking when I saw these figures, and I was thinking, well, what does this mean for the future? So we tried to predict in the research also the temperatures and see what the heat could do to the people. And we also interviewed some older people how they deal with those heat, and to give information and to show us how we should take into account their situation. If you, for instance, look on the right side of the sheet, there you can see the temperatures, the percentage of increasing of the heat waves and the temperatures in those cities. For instance, we did some interviews in Athens, Barcelona, London, Rotterdam, Stockholm, Warsaw. We tried to compare that, and we tried to see how these cities could learn from each other. Well, this is, I think it's a nice picture. We tried to show what the climate will be of the European cities, for instance, in 2050. This is based on the research, they call it the climate analytics, and it's based on a scenario from the IPCC. And in this figure, you try to show what kind of temperature you could expect in the future. For instance, like in Rotterdam, we expect that we will get the temperatures from Paris in the future. Lykke, I think it's also the same for Denmark, that they also would expect for the future the temperatures of Paris. But you all can see that, for instance, the temperature of Athens could be compared with the existing situation of Fes in northern Africa. Tbilisi, Warsaw will get the temperature of Tbilisi, and Stockholm from Budapest. So I think this gives a nice overview what kind of temperatures you could expect in the future. And maybe we can learn also how these cities deal with the heat. Maybe, for instance, Rotterdam can learn from Barcelona, that more people, you see in Spain, that a lot of people still are outside. And in the Netherlands, a lot of people are inside. And maybe we can make conditions that the people will go out to the parks and more to the green-blue areas. And especially, you could have seen that this summer also in Rotterdam or the Netherlands. Well, if you look to give some indication of the possible temperatures in the future for Rotterdam, that will rise around with 3.5 degrees. London 5.9, Barcelona 3.4, Stockholm 5.9, Warsaw 6.6 even, and Athens 5.7. That's the average temperature. So it's really changing. We expect it changing a lot in the future. I think this gives a good basis for also for discussion. What you can also see is that we have the effect of the urban heat islands, like Piero already said. This is even enforcing the effects of heat. This figure shows a little bit that the difference between the city and the outdoor areas could be very high. For instance, in Rotterdam, there was done some research in the past. In the city, the temperature in the city itself, in the center of Rotterdam, could be as high as 8 to 10 to 12 degrees more than in the outdoor areas. So that really affects the city. And I think you have to take into account also these effects of the urban heat islands. Well, how do people experience heat? I'm not going to go too much in detail, but we have interviewed especially some other people, how they deal with heat effects. For instance, like in the middle, you can see that the older people also have to change, or they change their behavior during the day. That they have to drink more, they take other techniques, take more showers, try to go to the shady areas. And I think that's very important if you design cities, that you take these aspects into account. Well, how do you do that? It's a little bit about resiliency. To make a city resilient, we have to say it's important to think more about the social impacts and the physical, the kind of infrastructure you have to, urban infrastructure you have to design. So make a kind of combination to that should be taken into account. And we try to make a kind of a framework for building resilience based on the literature. And the main principles are you have to prepare. After you have made the preparation, you have to absorb it, then you have to recover, then you can adapt. I think it's nice to compare, for instance, the situations we are dealing now with the COVID crisis. We were not prepared because we didn't think it would affect us in Europe. It started in China, so really we were not prepared. At this moment, we are absorbing the effects, we see what's happening, and we trying to recover from it based on experience we get, all kind of research. We try to find a vacant for the COVID situation, and then we can adapt. Well, I think you could compare this a little bit, how we could change our designs according to those principles of building resilience. So we have to prepare, then you have to absorb it, recover again from a situation, and you can learn from it, and then you can adapt. Well, this gives a little bit an overview. I go not to tell too much in detail, but if you try to build resilience, some examples. For instance, on the right side of the presentation, you can see a heat map, in this case, the city of Utrecht. So we try to make heat maps for the cities in the Netherlands that we are prepared. If we know where the most worst conditions are, we can combine these maps with where the people are living, so we can see which vulnerable people are dealing with the heat stress, so you can take your measures. Well, and then you can absorb. For instance, I think it's, well, I like a nice example of a little bus station. You see that people have to wait, not really in the sun, but in a more cool area when the train or the bus or the metro is coming. So you can also adapt, so you could say, this infrastructure for moving around. Well, if you have to recover, you have to also learn, and you have to build your networks, for instance. You have to, also this summit is based on exchanging knowledge. So you try to share the knowledge with each other and to improve so that you can adapt in the future. For instance, on the left side, you see a small example of how, for instance, a roof could be designed that people can sit on top of the roof, hopefully also in the shade when it is hot, so you can adapt to the new situation. Well, to come to an end to my presentation, I would like to make some conclusions that have been written in the report. We believe that the heat waves are still underestimated in the cities. We are not really prepared, and especially not prepared to protect the most vulnerable people, the older people getting older. Building resilience in individuals, communities, or cities can help us to recover. We have to adapt and transform because we have to interlink the different threats we are dealing with in cities. And hopefully we can apply the design principles, for instance, for, well, you could say that the younger people and the older people. If you make a city for these people, well, probably most people can live in these conditions. And I think to make the last final conclusion, I think what also is important for sharing knowledge, and we can protect what the current climate of our cities will be, most similar to in the future, and we can learn from each other how to deal with climate change. I think that's a nice well, step also to the other presenters. What can we learn from each other? How do, for instance, Copenhagen and Milan work on climate change adaptation, and especially on the heat stress? And I think that will be more highlighted by Lykke and Piero. And Tim, to come back to your question, well, how did you survive the summer? I found yesterday, a nice picture, and this gives an overview how I was trying to survive. Well, this was about 35 degrees. We had to work at home. It was much too hot inside the house, so I decided to try to work outside. And well, my wife made this presentation. I think, well, this is a little bit what shows how I was working at home in the summer in hot conditions. And well, you can see it's also a little bit stony area, but they are permeable. So if it is raining, the water, the nuisance, the water will go to the soil. So I hope that also my garden will stay green. Well, this is what I would like to present to you as an introduction to discussions on the effect of heat in Europe, Tim.
Yeah, this is very, very good to hear. And furthermore, I really like the picture. Actually, quite a bit jealous, to be honest. But it gives me inspiration for the next summer or the upcoming hot days. Just one question, because the fatalities of related to extreme heat, they're quite high. And in my opinion, this is also quite shocking. Do you think that we as people in cities, in various cities, are aware of the dangers and the effects of this extreme heat?
No, I think that was also what you were saying. It's shocking. When we started the research, it was also shocking to me because, like I said, we spent, you could say, billions of euros to protect the Netherlands against water because we are a low-lying country. But the casualties the last 50, 60 years are much less. But of course, we have to do it also because of the economic situation. But if you then look at those pictures, it's really shocking that there are many people dying from heat stress. And of course, the older people, they are vulnerable. It's always difficult to say, is it from the heat stress, is it from another situation? But more and more, we get the impression also from our healthcare in the Netherlands that really these people, because of heat stress, you can see it also in this summer already, show some figures that there's a high percentage of older people dying not only from the COVID, but also from the heat stress. So it's really a difficult situation, and it's very underestimated the effect of the heat on people.
Yeah. So actually, if I understand correct, you suggest that extreme heat should be more prominent in the climate debate.
Yeah, and I think especially in the forefront of the reconstruction or redesigning or development of new areas, that you take more into account for different reasons, especially look into you could say like this picture you are showing now, blue-green solutions for the future, because you have to bring this in the beginning of the process and not at the end, because then it's too late. So really start at the beginning of the process to deal with the impact of heat stress and make your design also adaptive.
Yeah. So this is quite interesting to see that as all the participants, when they subscribed, they also had to ask they also had to answer some of the questions. And related to extreme heat being more prominent in the climate debate, we can see that over 60% agrees. And there's about 28% that strongly agrees that we should focus more on extreme heat. And quite frankly, I'm also very curious how the awareness in Copenhagen is related to the extreme heat. So, Lykke, can you tell us a little bit? Are people aware of the fact that the climate is changing? I think yes, but also related to heat.
Well. If I start sharing my presentation, I think I can give you the answer right there in the headline, because we in Denmark in general, we think that we are underserved when it comes to warm summers. We've had a very strange year here. We had a very warm and sunny spring. We've had June was also fantastic. Then July came and was really cold and windy. That's when everybody's on vacation in Denmark. And since everybody was vacationing in Denmark, or most people were vacationing in Denmark, there was a lot of complaints about the lack of proper summer. And then August came and was really, really warm. And now we also have a very warm September. So it's strange, but just to say, it's never been a real issue, and I'll go through what we are trying to do anyway. So I'll go through sort of what are the risks, what are we doing, and what's the problem, and why don't we take it seriously, and how we are trying to sneak it in some of our other climate change issues. We started working in 2011 with our climate adaptation plan with a lot of risk assessment, but there was a lot of focus on water also because they actually present sort of the greatest economic challenges, the greatest risks. We had a short chapter on urban heat island and the possible effects on Copenhagen, a number of suggested measures, and a lot of links to how we could link that to other issues. We had maps illustrating how Copenhagen actually has a problem with urban heat island. This was from 2006. There was a big heat wave in Copenhagen. But it was really difficult to get politicians and other people working in the administration to get a real interest in the issue. People, as I said, do not see heat as a problem. And sort of our analysis showed that we would have summers in the future like Paris, and our then CEO at the Technical Environmental Administration, his comment was, bring it on as soon as possible. The sooner the better. And that sort of made it really difficult. And we had a lot of issues on how we could reduce probability scale and reduce vulnerability with her urban heat island as part of the climate adaptation plan. And I won't go into detail with this, but just to show you that it has been a part of our thinking from the very beginning. But one thing is what you would like to see as a planner and a bureaucrat working for the city. And another thing is where you can actually get the political traction to move forward. Another thing with heat, which people tend to forget, is that it actually also challenges our carbon emission goals, because if we have heat waves, we have and future heat waves will increase the use of cooling. If we all buy an air conditioner, I was happy to see that Enrico just moved into his little bathtub in the garden, rather than to have an air conditioning. But we also have an issue with light in Copenhagen. So the new buildings have huge windows. I live in a new 12-year-old apartment block here, and we have big windows. And I can see people who are facing south, how they are struggling with heat in the summer. So they're talking about air conditioning, which is also why the utility and the city have started working on district cooling in some of the central parts of Copenhagen to see, as the same as we have district heating, we can actually also have district cooling as a way of trying to keep. It's mainly office buildings. You can see it's a parliament, it's a castles, and it's a city hall. I think it also has district cooling, so that we can actually sort of minimize the risk of people switching to air conditioning. But what we are really trying to do, as I said, is to sneak it in. And one of the big things that Copenhagen is known for around the world is our cloudburst management plan, where we are trying to reorganize the city to be able to manage a 100-year rainstorm. But a lot of that is actually done by, or most of it is done by, surface solution, and that gives us a unique possibility to actually green the city through the project, minimizing hard gray surfaces and expanding tree cover in the city. And the picture on the right actually shows an example of that, where we in a sort of a traffic roundabout, we were able to reduce the hard surface with about 50% in that area, planting 300 trees or was it 600? I can't remember. An awful lot of trees. All of a sudden, we are now creating something that will actually also in the future hopefully have a cooling effect by reducing the hard surfaces. That's how we are trying to sneak it in. We are also working with it as part of our urban nature and biodiversity strategy. We have a goal of planting 100,000 trees. And of course, it makes a big difference whether you plant the trees in the center of the city where we have the biggest heat issues, or if you plant them out in an open area. But there's also a difference in price, I can tell you, of the price. So as I said, increasing biodiversity, expanding the tree cover in the city, having also close distances to green areas for citizens so that it's only within a couple of minutes walk to get into a green area is also a way of making heat more tolerable. Green connections when you're bicycling so that you're actually able to bicycle in the shade. Working with greening factors on buildings like green roofs and facades and so on. That will also, I mean, it's maybe not sold as an urban heat issue, but it's sold as a greening issue and biodiversity issue. But it has that double effect, and I don't care what they call it as long as it has the effect as well. Then we had 2018, which was in many ways a possible game changer. where we had a very hot, dry summer, almost 2 months with no rainfall. We had drought, we had heat waves, and we actually saw in Denmark a rise in death, especially in vulnerable and elderly people, with up to 250 people more dying. So we were in a situation where all of a sudden we could actually see the effects. And people could also see the effects. I mean, you were not supposed to, and you're not allowed to have a barbecue. All of a sudden, people were actually talking about climate change as not just something related to water, but actually also related to heat. So there's been a renewed interest in adapting to increased heat. And we did the first attempts of planning last year with the summer school we did with Ramble and Copenhagen City, where we looked at urban heat island problems and sort of tried to deliver toolkits and solutions in selected areas, focusing on what we would also call thermal comfort zones, areas where we have cool temperatures, areas where we have hot temperatures, and coming up with solutions to increase cool spots, to make it more or less the same as Enrico had in his presentation. Can you actually have measures that will make heat more tolerable, where you will be able to walk or bicycle in the shade and so on, have intersections with shading devices and so on. I think these are some of the things that we will slowly see interwoven into urban design in Copenhagen. And there are lots of toolbox, and again, I won't go into detail, with green infrastructure, heat risk reduction, and blue infrastructure using water also as a cooling feature in this. I mean, as for Copenhagen, the fact that you can go swimming in the harbor, in the city center, is a huge benefit also when it comes to managing heat in the summer. So my conclusion is that we do really have a need for holistic planning in the cities that take into account all these things. I think there's a lot to be gained with looking for synergies. How, I mean, even though you might have a big focus on cloudburst, you can actually also take into consideration heat. And we have also seen in Copenhagen that the COVID-19 crisis, the lockdown we had in the spring, has led to a huge demand in use for green spaces in the city, and with a lot of more activities taking place outside because of people not wanting to meet inside. We also need to look at green spaces as part of that in the future, how we can make sure that we can have these outdoor meeting places, because right now it's a COVID-19 situation that's pushing people outside, but in the future it might actually also be the heat, leaving a need for the green spaces in the future. And I think that's my conclusion. Holistic planning is one of the biggest answers.
All right, thank you very much. So if I understand correctly, you do want it to get a little bit hotter in Copenhagen, but at the same time, you're also aware of the fact that this increase in temperature will also bring a lot of challenges along with it.
I mean, I don't want it to be warmer in Copenhagen, but I think in general, if you ask people, they really like the outdoor and they really like being able to be outside in warm summer nights and so on. But we can also see that, I mean, we talk about nights where temperatures are above 20 degrees. We call them tropical nights. I don't think people in the tropics will call them a tropic night. And it actually reduces the comfort. I mean, people find it difficult to sleep and so on. So I don't think that people, if they were really sort of thinking through the whole thing, would want a much warmer Copenhagen than what we got now.
Yeah, so that's actually clear, and I think what quite interests me is that in 2018 you had a really difficult and heavy and hot summer then, so that lead I think to quite some actions as well. And you mentioned that you, as from the holistic planning, you're also about to plant more trees. And the question now is this are those trees being planted on public space, or do you also involve local citizens?
We have both planting on public space, but also we call them partnership trees, where basically the city pays for the tree and then you can plant it on a private land. And one of the reasons is that it's really expensive to plant trees along streets and so on, because there's so much underground infrastructure, so it's difficult to get enough or big enough holes for them to grow. And that's why we're also looking for private trees and private land to plant trees on.
So it's actually not only a new approach of planning, but it's also working together, involving stakeholders and using each other's strength.
We have this the vision of Copenhagen, or the strategic plan of Copenhagen, which is called Co-Create Copenhagen, which is about changing for the working for a change together with citizens and other stakeholders.
That's really good to hear, and I'm also very curious. Maybe thank you very much for your presentation. And I was wondering if Piero, do you also notice that people are getting more aware of the rising temperatures in Milan, and do you also see them taking actions, for instance, taking part in initiatives whereby they are greening their gardens?
Well, a funny story. When we started the program with the 100 Resilient Cities program, we had an initial workshop was 2015, and at that time people were July was super hot, and the people, we asked the shock and stress, the perception of the people. At that time, 2015, people were considering heat waves as a shock. Then we did the same in 2018, and a larger number of stakeholders keep the heat waves not anymore as a shock, but as a stress. So it's been that people get used to living in a warmer climate, at least in Milan. And so the definition that yes, the answer is yes. We got a lot of this. On the other end, we had a lot of participation as well on the sharing garden or other the bottom-up initiative on greening of people. And so there is more consciousness. This doesn't mean that people believe in climate change. They're just adapting. So there is a big difference sometimes in what the people are deciding, because the same people during the day, maybe they drive their cars, they still using heating over the winter with gas line. So adapting is not meaning taking action on climate change. It just maybe living in a comfort way. That is an important topic, I think, for the future of the climate change adaptation action in general.
Okay, it's quite interesting to hear that people are actually perceiving temperatures to rise, and also seeing it from a shock towards a stress. But at the same time, they also might kind of disagree with the climate changing. So I'm quite interesting how you within the city of Milan are dealing with that. So how do you inspire people to do take action?
Yeah, can you can you see my screen now? Really, right? It's happened something unpredictable. It's like climate change. Something happened unpredictable.
It's almost there.
You see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. That's good. So even now that I'm going full screen, just to be sure that everything is working perfectly. Is it? You can see everything, right?
And we do still see the side window from the PDF.
Oh gosh.
But
Now, still,
yeah.
but I've seen the bigger one. That's a good point. Now you can see something moving.
No, it's still at the same. So maybe just take us along, and then I think your words will be inspiring enough.
Yeah, I can. Oh gosh, everything is going crazy. Okay, anyway, I will start in the meantime. The city of Milan have seen over the last 120 years an increase of the temperature of 2 degrees on the annual temperature. As I said before, if we keep it short at the period, since 1951 until now, we got 3 plus 3 degrees increase on the local scale based on the local data. So it's not based on the satellite data, based on the data collected by our weather meteorological system here in Milan. This has led the City Council to declare the climate and environmental emergency last May 2019. We were the first Italian city to declare the climate emergency because we have seen that there is a significant need to take action. The city itself to face the climate emergency, the mayor has also decided to keep on his shoulder all the different policies and the competencies over climate change and environment. So it's quite a unique thing that, yes, the mayor normally speaking is a leader in climate change, but now he's also the deputy mayor in charge for climate change and environment because he wants to lead personally this thing. And to do that, we have created a new department, is named Environmental Transition Department, composed by 3 different areas. City Resilience Department, Climate and Energy, and Water Resources, Environmental IT areas. So we try to move further on climate, starting on climate change adaptation, starting from the management, for the organization of the city itself as a public servant. We learn a lot from Copenhagen, from Rotterdam, from Paris, and from all the other cities in a member of the C40 or member of the 100 Resilient Cities Network to how they cope with climate change, starting from the decision-making process, because I think it's really important. We have now in a phase of defining the new air and climate plan of the city. So we got the Sustainable Energy Action Plan, we got an energy plan, but now we wanted to move, and instead to multiply the different planning tools, we decided to keep 3 different elements all together: climate change adaptation, climate change mitigation, and air quality as in a unique plan to try to look and integrate the different action and solution, so to move further on the win-win approach. And for us, the city adaptation, especially focusing on this, it's looking at 2 main impact of climate in the city. Extreme heat, as I mentioned. On the other hand, we have seen also flash flooding. What does it mean? That if 50 years ago we normally had 50 days of rain, nowadays we got 18 days of rain somehow. So the comparison is less than half day of raining. Or to give you some specific number, was almost a month ago, was during the summer, over a night from 11:30 p.m. until 3:30 a.m. in the morning, we got 130 millimeters of water. Suddenly it happened, and it's big impact for us. So keep in mind that we need to look at extreme heat and flash flooding when we look at the possible solution. So the first element that we started working was to working on the so-called the master plan of the city. Normally for us is the territorial government plan of the cities, because we need to set up the rules for the next 10 years. Why we need to set the rules of the next 10 years? Because the real estate market is expecting to have 40% of the Italian real estate market, was before the COVID, this number, happening in Milan. So almost 0.5% of the real estate market in Italy since 2019 until 2030 going to happen in Milan. So we have a significant impact on the building sector. So the master plan has identified one of the strategy was the number 6 is designed for the new ecology of the city itself. So you're going from the consumption to reduce, minimize energy consumption to the renaturalization and to maximize the permanent surface in the city. How we got to this point? So when we look at resilience, I speak about Italian legislation, but we have also made some experience or some research around, and you try to codify resilience in practice, you normally don't find any kind of legislation on resilience. There is something in the US like relating resilience in the building code. We got something related to emergency, but when we look at real legislation about resilience and climate change in place, there is not so much. Paris did something for the master plan, but in general, we always clear climate change adaptation and so on. So we believe that the new standard for all buildings was essential. So we have introduced a new index, is named the Climate Impact Reduction Index. So we have defined not only how much a new building and a new infrastructure is impacting on the existing environment, but we are also now introducing an index to try to look how a new building can contribute to reduce the impact of climate change. So it's not only how you impact on the nowadays environment, also how a building can contribute to reduce the impact of climate change. How we make it? We make it mandatory for new buildings to introduce green roof and green facade on the building. We have looked to increase the permeable surface in the area surrounding the buildings. And if for some, we have a lot of cultural limitation, restriction in our building to the cultural hedge in the city. If you have a restriction, you cannot go for it. You can monetize the standard, the calculation of the standard, and we have linked this monetization to the Forestami Fund. Forestami Fund is the program of the urban forest program we have launched more than 1 year ago to planting 3 million trees before 2030 in the metropolitan area of Milan. Because we try to look and to work on the greening perspective, that is something necessary for air quality and is necessary for mitigation, but also is necessary for adaptation. Why? Because we can increase the canopy tree, the canopy of the cities, so it's meaning working on the extreme heat, and considering urban forest, not only the tree itself, but also the green areas that the tree and all the environment could create, is also helping us to reduce the extreme weather events in the city. So we look at the greening as an integrated approach for mitigation, adaptation, and air quality in general to increase the value of them. But this standard that we have introduced, the Article 10 and the Climate Impact Reduction Index, has also an important system that is linked to the 20 new parks that the city is planning before 2030. So we've got to 20 new parks. But as well, we also have done something that Copenhagen and Rotterdam, they do since Lykke was saying that she is working since 20 years on climate adaptation. So we are quite younger on the climate adaptation. But we also designed a new map, and a new map with a new implementation of green and blue infrastructures in the cities. So we have now created space given to the private sector and the public sector proper identification of the spot when they have, and we can create new infrastructures that are green and blue. So it's an important cultural step for us as Milan City. So from this point, we also start working, as I said, we have Forestami, we got the Article 10, and the climate adaptation, we also, can you see my presentation? Not, it's still stop right at the beginning, or you can see something?
No, it's working, it's working.
Okay, it's working, perfect. So from this perspective, we have moved to the Milan Resilience Strategy, and Milan Resilience Strategy, as I said before, has identified for climate adaptation, 2 main topics that you can see here in thematic areas: water cities and cool Milan. You mentioned before you come to Milan. When you come to Milan, maybe you know that there is also the Navigli, that is the canal where you normally go to have a spritz and enjoy your summertime. But Milan is a city on water, so we have 3 rivers, and there is a plan for the city to reopen the canal, the Navigli, that is meaning to bring back to the city more than 80 kilometers of canal that were covered when comes the car-driven society, because you need a car, you need space, you need street, you need parking slot. What we do, we cover the canal. So reopening the canal for us, it's an important contribution to reduce the heat temperature in the cities for 2 reasons. One is a good infrastructure is absorbing the heat. On the other hand, we reduce the number of cars. Why we need to reduce the number of cars? Normally, cars is only looked at as an emission factor. But we are taking some measures, dedicated measures of the city or the car parking in July around the city. If a surface temperature is 35 degrees and the building temperature, the surface, the building is 50 degrees, a car park is 70 up to 80 degrees, the temperature of the cars. So we consider also the car as a heat sources in the city. So reduce the number of cars for us. We already taken from 80 every 100 people in the late 80s, and we now reached 49. We still need to keep 26 cars to reach Copenhagen. If I'm not wrong, it's 23 cars every 100 inhabitants. But for us, these measures become a win-win solution for mitigation and adaptation, also because we have some more interesting points to share. On the other hand, so water cities for us is important. The other hand is Cool Milan. And Cool Milan is not because we are a designer or a fashion capital. Cool Milan is as well. It's something that it's helped us to reduce. And how we reduce? Well, basically we copy and paste Rotterdam initiative on the roof. And because when an initiative is great, why we should consider to do something new? Let's work with colleagues and identify. So we are now defining the platform, as you can see on the right side, a map of all the roof in the city. We have potentially 40 million square meters of roof in the city. 1 million is already green. And we want to provide to every building owners the indication what you can do with your roof. You can do green roof, you can do a solar roof, do you want a white, or you can do a white roof because you have cultural restriction, or you want going for a gray roof. So we work on climate adaptation, looking at the champion of climate adaptation, as one is Rotterdam. So with my colleagues, I know more than the CRO and was working, we had working on this identification. So this is another pillar for us that is important. The other things, still we are copying and paste from where? From Paris, and then Barcelona, and then Athens. They work on the School Oasis program, the Paris School Oasis program. Why? We have more than 1,000 school buildings in the city. So it's meaning that the school are the more densified building within the city. So when you step out from your house, the more closest public building is a school. Why we need a school? On the one hand, we want to improve the greening areas around the school because it's not so obvious here in the country. Maybe in Denmark and Netherlands it's more obvious to have green areas around the schools. But we want also to open this park, not being like closed as a school, but be open to the community, because during the summer we had an extra green areas where we can provide. But then we also needed to increase the number of recovery shelter for elderly, especially during the summer. Because you cannot tell to an elderly person, a lady, a man, go in the parks with 45 degrees, because we basically tell them go to die, because when the temperature increases, the ozone increases as well. So for who has a respiratory problem, we need to identify new structures. And for us, school, that is an asset for the city that never be used over the summer, it become a shelter to recovery during the heat waves for elderly people. So we are infrastructuring 2 or 3 rooms within that, and to create as well a recreative situation for the elderly in the city. And again, we learn from Paris, we learn from Barcelona, we learn to Athens. We don't need to always look for new ideas. We just need to keep going and making happen what the others are showing, that is sustainable in terms of economics and it's useful for our community. So the Milan School Oasis has a big role as this issue. And then I go to the last really, because I think I use all my time. The last thing is related to energy. We had several experience on energy efficiency, smart cities program, and so on. But we learned something from there. It's how we can move to energy community. Why we want to move to energy community and try to make the city self-sufficient from the energy point of view, because as well, becoming a self-sufficient and improving renewable energy and create the energy communities in adaptation measures in a time where our energy grid, the electricity energy grid, is suffering and is stressed by the heat. Over the last few years, we have seen a lot of blackout in the city because the peak of demand of energy is equal now in December and in summer. So because the increase of the number of air conditioning is so much that just a number, the heatwaves is the energy utilities where the city of Milan is a shareholder, has projected an increase of 40% of energy demand before 2030 in the city. For three main elements. One is electric vehicles, the second one is air conditioning, and the third one is the increase of all domestic technology being used. So identify the microgrid and the self-sufficient is now becoming necessary, even not if you want to move for mitigation, but as an adaptation measures to reduce the blackout and to guarantee to all the community the energy over time. And then if we are capable to create energy communities and work on the self-sufficient community, we also reach another goal, that is reducing the emission and work on the clean energy. So for us, all this kind of problem, the energy community is another benefit. And I'm finished, and I'm sorry if I take maybe some minutes now.
No, that's quite interesting, and thank you for this quite intensive presentation. So if I understand correct, you do have the political commitment from the mayor and the deputy mayor, and you're already taking quite some actions in Milan. So what I find curious is how do you what kind of lessons learned can you share with the other cities? Because you're telling that you're actually learning from Rotterdam, from Copenhagen, from Paris, from Athens. But if the weather patterns will change and the temperature in Copenhagen and Rotterdam will rise, then actually you are more or less the city that the other cities will look to. So do you have some tips and tricks and what should we do and what should we not do?
Well, that's a funny story actually. That's over the last couple of years, I got a lot of requests by Dutch colleagues from Amsterdam, from Rotterdam, or from private organizations to come in Milan and study how Milan is dealing with the heat waves. Because they said, we are facing an increase of heat waves here, and we are super good with water and flash flooding, but we don't have so much experience of the heat. And they always tell a story that it's a two story actually. The first one, in the southern part of the country, then in Italy, that is considered the poorest part of the country, we had the biggest solution for climate change adaptation, in my opinion. They were at the time occupied by and conquered by the Arabs, but they heredited the cultural, the architectures coming from Arabs. And then there is the natural ventilation, having blue spot within the house. It's a learning lesson. So sometimes, I stress this, the fact that we need to copy and paste when something is working. That, in my opinion, too much time we are looking at climate adaptation as an IT, an infrastructure solution, something that we need to push hard to find new things. But resilience is composed by two elements, innovation and memory, and remembering. So sometimes making two steps back is meaning going one step further, because maybe the solution was already owned by our grandfather and the previous. So that this is the first lessons learned. The second one is let's say we got an interesting situation over the last 20 years when we need to improve our energy efficiency in building. We have always look at the northern country as the method, and we learn a lot from them from energy efficiency. But you somehow your standard of energy efficiency, it's related to more the cold weather and the heat, and not to the heat. So we have now new buildings that basically are near-Rosildi buildings, so are super efficient, that during the summer become an oven because are super isolated. So again, we need to look at the integration, the mixture of culture that we are having within our community. So welcoming all kind of person is a resources that could learn from us, and they could learn from the others. And Milan has always been an inclusive. So with the community coming from the northern part of the Mediterranean, from the southern part of the Mediterranean, and all the others, we create a dialogue to learn from the people, because their own country where they come from, they're already facing heat, for example, since years. So working on inclusiveness, it's not only a matter of justice or equality, it's also a matter that we have new resources that are coming from the other part of the world that we can learn. So that is the two simple lessons that we have learned, that things that sometimes it's much easier than expecting the lessons.
Well, that's good to hear, and hopefully Lykke is still there, because Lykke, you were also talking about the buildings in your city that also turn to be ovens. So taking this into account and listening to Piero, I think you can learn something from this approach. Do you also involve communities, and do you also learn from well, the memories that other people already have?
Well, I mean, we again, we still need this to be more broadly recognized as an issue that you need to work with from a community point of view. I mean, we have a lot of traction when it comes to green. People are screaming for more green in the city. When it comes to buildings, it's not so much yet, but I think it will be coming over the coming years. And when it comes, I'm so happy that there'll be other cities that have started working with these things, so we can go stealing there. I think that some of the ideas in adaptation, I think Piero, he said it quite nicely. I mean, why spend a lot of time trying to invent something yourself when somebody, I mean, if other cities have already invented it. So when I think we are seeing some, I mean, they are building a new building on the harbor front here, which will have a green facade, and that is both for cooling, but it's also for greening. So there is, I think there's a movement towards it. I think it's slow, and I think you also need the people who are actually buying property here to have that, because when we bought the flat where I'm living in right now, back in 2018, we were sort of concerned because it was facing northeast, and were we actually going to be having problems with not having enough sun and so on. And after having lived here in the summer of 2018, we are so happy that we didn't pick a flat that's facing southwest, because people there are really suffering from the heat and so on. So I think it is about people having that experience, and in those cases always also having the demands. I mean, it can also be for comfort in buildings, looking to very old Mediterranean traditions of having blinds on the, I mean, that you can close during the day so that you can actually keep the buildings cool. There are lots of things where sort of where countries where they have been living with heat for a long time have solutions to provide us for. We just need to adapt them to a modern architecture, but I think there's a lot of possibilities in doing just that in the future.
Yeah. So on the one hand, you have on a larger scale, like building scales, you can adapt those buildings already. But are there also things that the people themselves can do? Maybe Enrico, you had a great example of getting the pool to cool down. So that is something that you as an individual can do already. I do have the comment that you should also regreen your garden to lower the temperature and stimulate the biodiversity. So I think those are two steps still to be taken. But how do you see the relationship between, on the one hand, cities with regulations, how to adapt, and on the other hand, what can people, so what can I and what can the participants themselves do to cope with the heat?
Yeah, I think thanks, Tim. I expected that question a little when I showed the picture of the part of the my garden that was working, and I get some comments. Okay, you have to green your garden. I think it's very important that the people are aware what they can do themselves on the garden. We are also still working on it, and also my city of Nieuwegein, where I live, is working on the bluing and the greening of the city, and working together with the local people to see what is possible to improve and to help to adapt to the situation. Like in the Netherlands, for instance, about 60% of the open space is particular. They have to do it themselves, so the government cannot do, the city itself cannot do everything. So you have to participate with the people, and that means that you have to raise the awareness still and to see what happens. And what you could see, for instance, in Copenhagen in 2011, they had you could say a big disaster, a lot of flooding, and that helped the city to make some steps forward by the Copenhagen plan. And sometimes you need these kind of stresses, like we had this summer on the heat, to make the people aware that they also can do themselves, participate in helping the city to be climate adaptive. Well, and if I look, for instance, at the city of Rotterdam, I'm not from the city itself, but you can see that they're still working on step by step on the greening of the city together with the local people. They're going step by step forwards. And I think the city already is in a new situation. They did a lot of new projects, innovation, experimenting with, you could say, companies or the people or the city itself, the public people working in Rotterdam, that you go step by step forward, being aware of the situation. And I agree with Lykke. She said we can learn from each other. That was also the basis from my presentation. Don't invent everything new. Like in Milan, the southern part of Italy, they are used to building for hot areas. So learn from each other and try also to you could say pickpocketing, to change ideas from each other and try to build on your city step by step. I think that's what you could do. And I think still the awareness and the people that takes a lot of time, but there are some new techniques to get people active, that they also act themselves on greening, for instance, your own garden.
Yeah, maybe that's also a nice bridge to some of the actually a new project that is going on in Rotterdam. There's an old, more or less competition between Rotterdam and Amsterdam. So two cities. Of course, there's a natural, let's say, a natural tension between those cities. And actually, both cities, they started a competition. Which city can remove as much tiles as possible out of the people's gardens? So there's actually now not a fight, but there's a competition going on. Who is doing best now? And maybe that's also something that I see at my own garden. I see also a competition between me and my girlfriend. And on the one hand, she wants trees, but not too much, because she also like the practicality of not having to trim the weed and stuff like that. So maybe Piero also has a tip for me how to deal with the competition indoors.
So indoor competition. Well, I think Enrico has found a good solution, going out and having a kid swimming pool when they can work. Indoor solution, we also work and try to look. One of the projects, the Smart City program, we have worked on identifying, developing a new sensor with the Polytechnic of Milan measuring not the energy efficiency but the comfort within a house. So how we can measure the comfort house, the comfort within the house, which is helping us to identify on new potential solution in terms of greening the house inside, but at the same time how we can then reframe also the design of the house and the standard within the house that it could help to create a new space, a different space, but at the same time improving the quality of living. I never thought actually about how we can improve the indoors or indoor space and the comfort of space within a house. We've seen a lot in our buildings, but we are trying to, to work more on the people participating in work and staying outside, the outdoor activities, in the sense that except for the elderly, because there is also a matter of living the cities and safetyness of the city, because an empty city is it's a dangerous city, and so living outside. But indoor, it's a good challenge, and there is a conflict, in my opinion, to indoor solution and indoor things. That it's increasing the surface of the house. It's meaning increasing the soil consumption. And yes, after the COVID, we've seen a lot of people asking for a bigger house for this, and with a balcony and so on. But then how you can mix these two needs?
Yeah, I think that's a good question to raise, and maybe also a nice thought for to take home. Because when I tend to start the discussion with my girlfriend, the temperature always rises up. So that means that I think in the future we will definitely see more temperature increase. And I'm very happy to hear all these kind of measures taken by all these different cities already. And I do like to actually thank all the speakers for all their input. And I like to thank participants as well for their enthusiastic reactions as well. So please do keep sending us your tips and tricks, and do share your lessons learned with us. We will send a short summary of this session, and we will announce it also via our website. We also will launch a podcast also related to climate adaptation topics. So there's a lot going on in the upcoming days, and there's something that we can use your ambition and passion with that as well. So for now, I'd just like to quickly close this session actually already. Please do write in your agendas that within 3 weeks we have another session, and that is the second one in the series. But for now, first let me thank you, Lykke, for your enthusiastic contribution. I find it quite interesting how, actually you started with a cloudburst and started to adapt towards extreme heat as well. So that's quite interesting. Do you happen to have any last final conclusions or recommendations or?
Well, I think the main conclusion is that we have to work with all these adaptation measures as interlinked as we possibly can, so we can actually get the most out of the money that the city is spending, and it has to be part of the urban development in the future. And we haven't even come across sort of the more critical situations. Actually, when we had a webinar in the beginning of in the middle of the COVID crisis, where my son Jonathan and I, we did this series called Leonardsen and Mom. We had Piero as a guest, and there was actually one of the participants from New York who talked about having they have so much issues with heat in New York City that they normally have these cooling centers, but they couldn't have cooling centers this summer because of COVID and the risk of infection. And later on, I learned that they were now in this situation going to install, I think it was around 70,000 air conditioning units in homes of vulnerable people who couldn't go now to cooling centers. So, I mean, we can actually also see backlashes, and we have to try to work as much to stay ahead of things in the future, so that we do not end up in situations like that.
Yeah, that's. I think that's a good message to take home, and it's actually it quite concerns me as well to hear those kind of numbers. It's quite intense. So let's try to translate it towards some positive remarks, and I think it could also be an opportunity to deal with climate change, and not only flooding and heating, but also to use heating. And I think that is also the link that Piero made earlier in his presentation, that they also can do something about the energy challenges that they face. So Piero, again, also thank you very much for your contribution. Would you like to have to share also a final remark?
Well, well, thank you to all of you to setting up this initiative in general, the Climate Adaptation Summit. I think it's important to this. Well, it's a final remark, but it's more something that we need to face all together. We always keep to remind that climate action could also have negative impacts, especially on gentrification and equality of the population. Because if making a new urban regeneration process with all the standard of climate change is meaning that we rise the price and the cost of the housing because we have a better quality and push the people to relocate, that it's positive for climate, negative for the community. So my final remarks that we all together, we have to make a collective action that push for adaptation, but the adaptation should keep equality and equity within the community as a main driver to make not only a more resilient territory, but also a more inclusive and equal community. That is something that there is not too much discussion, and I think with Lykke, with Enrico, and with Arnaud, with all the practitioners we are doing over the last 20 years, we have the capacity, the know-how to avoid negative effect of the climate change adaptation on the equality. Sorry for a sort of negative action, but it's more launching a new.
No, I totally agree. I think it's very important to bridge that gap, and it is also nice. It's also a nice bridge to the session that we have in 6 weeks from now. That is also not only about climate adaptation, but also the social awareness and participation of the various stakeholders. So it's always good to take into account that climate adaptation on itself is not the only challenge, but how to use it to better the lives of a community, but also of individual peoples. And maybe, well, Enrico, I think that your pool, I'm coming back to it because I'm still a bit jealous about it, but your pool already bettered your life, I think. Do you have some other final closing remarks to end this session?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yeah, it was nice to have this little pool. So, but I was impressed also by the presentations of Lykke and Piero. I think my introduction was, well, the heat stress will be vulnerable to especially some groups. And what you can see is that in both cities like Milan and Copenhagen, they are already working and trying to start on it. I think it's important to change and to share the knowledge, what you are doing already today, and learn from each other. Like Piero was telling about South Italy, I think with the Arabic influences, they already work on it. So the memory is important. And try to take that into account when you start thinking about redesigning or designing new areas in your city. I would like to stress that I think the green-blue solutions are very important, both in space but also in the buildings, because the heat will increase in the future. I think the awareness is still going on and should be improved for the future. And we think about the future, well, towards 2050, sometimes even towards 2100. So I would like to say to the people, networks are very important. Learn from each other. Sharing knowledge is very important. Then you can make steps forward. And you cannot do that in a short time. It takes time. Think on the short term, think on the midterm, and think on the long term. And if you do that, I would say, think global, but really act local and do it together with your organizations, with the people, with the public organizations, and with the companies involved. Then you can make the difference. So I think cooperation together within the city, outside the city, in Europe, I think that's important.
All right, thank you very much. It really gives me a good feeling, and I do realize that the temperatures will rise in the future. But if I understand correctly, and I do have the confidence, but based with you guys as thought leaders, that together we can definitely not only learn from each other, but we can also make our cities and our local streets a better place to live in as well. And I do think that we also need to remember the past and remember all the good practices and good innovations that already have been proven to help a lot. So again, thank you very much. Also for the participants, thank you very much again.